Thank you for coming this morning. This is the third town hall we're having for the parish engagement process. My name is Kate Stratman, and there are a number of parish engagement committee members assisting us today with microphones and taking attendance. So when the clipboard comes around, you're not signing up for anything, it's just attendance. I want to remind you of the opportunities for engagement. Not only this town hall and next week, there are 10 in-home gatherings available. A survey will be live on the 25th of the month. There's also the QR code that was in this morning's bulletin, along with the websites you can write to or and information you can refer to. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Hank Hauser, who is with Hauser Walker, and he has been facilitating these meetings for us, and we'll get started. Thank you.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me? Yep. So how many of you were here last week? So a good number, maybe half, something like that. So last week I started with the question of if anybody came to see an architect's presentation of a master plan. And we got nobody last week. So presumably nobody has that expectation today. Is that right? Right. So we're here. I'm an architect in Atlanta, but we're here today not as architects, but as facilitators of a conversation and to listen to you. Nothing has been decided. I think the church, you have been considering what to do with the campus for a long time, what the future of the block looks like. I think Simon has called this a Kairos moment, which is a moment in history that's pregnant with crisis and opportunity. So it's a moment of potential change, of potential not change, but of intentionality. And I think it's interesting to think back. This isn't the first time that All Saints, the parishioners of All Saints, have sat in a room and talked about opportunity of what to do on this campus. 120 years ago, your founders likely sat in a room and would talk about the size of the church, the style of the church, how to position the church, and the results that came out of that conversation still affect congregants today, still affect you as a community today. And in last week's session, it ended with kind of a beautiful comment that started with, we're not every church. There's lots of suburban churches that are different than who All Saints is, and at the core of All Saints is that we are in this location, and it's a complicated location. I mean, there's so many more issues than what a church in suburbia would deal with. And she ended by saying, it wasn't that long ago that where we were sitting was a car lot. And again, there were moments where the church came together, talked about what the future of the church would be, and how the campus can help shape that. So we're here today to talk about potentially what the campus will, the physical presence of the campus in Atlanta will be in the next 50 years. But really what we're talking about is a vision for yourselves as a group of people and who attest to the gospel in this location in Atlanta. And so that's what we want to hear. And in a few minutes, I'm going to ask somebody to raise their hand and be the first person to speak, and I'll be thankful for whoever that first person is. But maybe before we do that, I'll tell you a little bit about kind of the process of master planning and what we hope to get out of today. So every master plan that we do, we break down into three phases. The first phase is always research. We call it information gathering. That's what we're doing now. No decisions have been made about anything, and that's intentional. The intentionality there is to collect as much information, both in terms of constraints, what goals are, what the potential opportunities are, what specific ideas are, and put those in a hat and stir them around, and then start making decisions after that kind of core of research is done. After we do information gathering, then we come into and what's the core of master planning. And that's when we draw multiple ideas of how the campus can respond to those those goals, what the goals are for the church. And then the third is concept design, where it's becoming where it is a project. It would be a drawing of, a room that's this size, that if the results came out to say we want a parish, a fellowship hall that can accommodate 300 people or whatever it would be, we'd start drawing that and see how it fits on the campus. So we're a long way away from drawing specific things for the campus. And what we're here today is to talk about, we want to hear what your goals are for the church as it lives in this place for the next 50 years. Your vision, your optimistic vision of All Saints for who you are as a community, how you connect with your neighbors, your role, what it means to be a city church, an urban church, a church in Atlanta in this location. I should have started by saying how honored I am to be a part of this conversation, and thank you for that. I went to architecture school across the highway, and since then I've been working as an architect in Midtown for 30 years. So I'm not a parishioner at All Saints, but I've been a curious neighbor and understand the importance of All Saints, not just to you, but to Atlanta and to the world. Simon again mentioned the Kairos moment, and it's not just All Saints. The whole idea of what it means to be a church, and especially an urban church, is changing. It's evolving. Church attendance is going down. The cost of maintaining church campuses is going up. So there are a lot of churches that are struggling. There are churches that are going under. There are churches that are doing wonderfully. And so today we want to hear your goals, what your objectives are, what your vision is, and if you have any ideas. And we had a really great conversation last week, and for those of you that heard it, I don't want you to be afraid if something resonated with you. I don't want you not to say something just because it was said last time. Ultimately, the goal is to have this many ideas and to narrow it down to a single idea. And so it's not just hearing each idea once. If we hear things multiple times, that shows that it resonates more strongly than maybe something that we only hear once. So if something's on your heart, regardless of what it is, we want to hear it today. I've kind of outlined what your impact will be in terms of the process. But if you want to talk about parking, if you want to talk about toilets, if you want to talk about anything that's on your heart, it'll make it into the meeting notes, and it'll be there for a record. And we've been a part of conversations that have started talking about toilets and have ended in a wonderful conversation about being hospitable. So we hope today will be an organic conversation like it was last time. And I'll point out, Anne is going to be taking notes. So the idea is to capture everything that's said. And so if we misunderstand what you say, we want you to correct us. We want to make sure that we get it right. And Sloan is also taking more detailed notes. So 2 note takers, everything that you say is going to be captured. And I think that reflects an intentionality from the church leadership of just how important what you say is. And if you don't feel comfortable talking, but something is on your heart, you've been given a QR code. You can email anybody on the church leadership committee. So maybe I'll stop there. Any questions about process before we get into the heart of the conversation? Wonderful. Does anybody want to kick us off with yes, sir. Thank you.
I would like to see covenant community restored and enlarged. Drug addiction, alcoholism is a major problem in Atlanta and the U.S. and the world. And if we can do something to make a significant step in the care and improvement of that facility, I think that'd be a great idea.
Wonderful. So the comment is an expansion of the ministry for caring for those with addiction problems. Would you see that as on campus, as a physical?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, but something that's specific to the location that's here, important to Atlanta and the world. Yeah. Thank you very much. Who's next? Yes, ma'am. Well, okay, go ahead. I'll repeat back.
If anybody knows what's going to go on with the varsity. So how that might affect us.
Yeah. So the question is about what's going to happen at the varsity, and I don't know. I mean, I pay reasonably close attention to what's going on. I saw in the news last week that they consolidated their parcels into a single parcel over the last couple of years, and we know that they've been open to conversations with developer for potential development. You know, I think that the logic of how that plays out is that it will most likely, the highest value of that parcel, if they want to maximize the value, is that you'll get something very tall. Is that there'll be some sort of big development that's located there, and then beyond it, the connector park, which has been planned for years, which could be a wonderful change to All Saints of having additional open space that bridges the interstate. I suspect that the developers the varsity family, I forget their name, is in conversations with, or are kind of intimately involved with that development. But it's also important to recognize MARTA is in conversations with developers for the redevelopment of that station. So it's not unreasonable to think that in 20 years the open parcels that surround All Saints will be developed. But thank you for that question. Yeah.
So
All right, who's next?
one of the questions I have is, can we leverage the existing architecture or the walls, of the church and the surrounding buildings for any kind of urban gardening?
So the question is, can the existing architecture in place be leveraged for an urban garden?
Right, like whether it's vertical or, and just whether it's to provide food. I'm just thinking of any extra space that you can use in that capacity.
So maybe I'll put that back on you as opposed to a question for the guy standing in the front of the room. I'll put it back to you and ask presuming there is intent in your question, what would you like to see?
I'm just thinking of different ways to feed people that we know have those needs in the community, and or maybe make money off of it. If it's, again, fresh gardening, you could do it seasonally, and also it could be something that the kids could help participate in as well.
So an urban food garden.
Right.
Yeah, so that's a wonderfully interesting idea. There are certainly examples of that out there where there are cities that plant apple trees for street trees that become opportunities for folks that want an apple can share an apple. But thank you for that question. Who's next? Yes, ma'am. Oh, I'm sorry. Right here.
I'm sorry.
Hey, no,
Somebody
please.
else. So many of us in this room are not going to be alive to see this happen, and we octogenarians really are depending upon the young people and the children to carry on the vision of All Saints. And I wish there was so many young people here to give their thoughts on this topic especially. I'm concerned about them. Is there going to be a place where they can meet and gather, not just from junior high to high school, but the young people who come back after college? And, this is my church. And it showed at Christmas time when Mrs. Kimmel announced that she was leaving. Our grandchildren, they wouldn't miss for sure, because it was Mrs. Kimmel's going to go, and we have to be at our church. And I don't want them to lose that identity with the church. So a spot for them.
Yeah. So I think two important points there. First, just a recognition of the importance of the next generation. but both in terms of carrying on the All Saints tradition, but again in the Kairos moment, that it is the younger generation is, I think, 65. A third of all churchgoers are 65 years or older, and so how churches in general connect with the younger generation and what those activities are and what's meaningful and how to bring them in should absolutely be an important part of the conversation. And I think it's also wonderful to recognize that this group will be making decisions that impact you, but perhaps the most impactful decisions will be for your children and your grandchildren and for their children for years to come. Yeah, thank you for that. Yes, sir. Are we got a microphone? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm bouncing around. We'll come here next. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm supposed to hold this close. This is really more of an observation. This church has a history of developing various social ministries in particular, but other things. And they develop them and then they essentially kind of spin them off, which shows a bit of nimbleness and flexibility. My concern when we're looking at a big plan for the block is that we maintain a sense of flexibility and nimbleness, because as the last commentator worked out, I'm not going to be here. A lot of us aren't going to be here. We don't know if some of the things that we decide today are going to work in the future if we get into a rigid structure. I don't know any other way to put it.
Yeah, it's a great point that we're planning for 50 years out, but we certainly don't know what's going to be important to the church in 50 years and what the needs of the community will be in 50 years. So having that kind of flexibility is important to recognize, that we will make decisions and plans based on what's known today, but there needs to be flexibility in the future. Yeah, thank you for that. Yes, sir.
I have been interested in what general services the campus could offer to the community. I note that, for example, Covenant Community, well, the businesses that are in the back corner face away from the campus. And I'm thinking something like a coffee shop, which we could use on Sunday, but would bring people onto the campus during the week. I'd like to be creative about services that we could offer to people who are underserved. For example, a microloan business, or something else that would make better use of the campus during the week when we all aren't here, but that would fit within the mission of the church. And also potentially could be money-making, as the rental properties are now. I think they need to be, to some extent, self-sufficient in terms of how they use the space. But I'd like to be creative about kind of following what Missy said about flexibility and nimbleness. What could we be doing with this space that no one else is doing in this area in the same way?
It's a great question, and I think if anybody out there has ideas, today would be a great time to put those on the table. And I'd say certainly a common theme that we've heard from you is the desire to provide services to those in need, your neighbors in need. And I think it's I'd say kind of the sweet spot for an urban church is to find opportunities that are sustainable opportunities, that provide that allow the church to be a landlord for financial income, to allow to be a landlord for services that the community need that may not make sense in other locations, but are kind of core to the missions of the church. So I think if there are, and I think a core message we heard last time is an attention to the existing community services that are provided on campus, that those are either bolstered or that those are at least persist, if not bolstered in there. And so then the question before us is, are there other things that we consider that the neighbors in need? Thank you. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Just in relationship to the idea of flexibility and then the idea of social services and the idea of the mission of the church. And I began to get a little nervous with, well, what is the central, most powerful mission, that the power center of this new being, this new creation? And I guess the first thing that comes to my mind, with all the tall things, the buildings so overshadowing, that there be real intentional development of green space rather than ornamental tree here or bushes there, but how people move within a space. And those things won't change as rapidly over time. They've been looked at for at least 80 years now, carefully, and combined with architectural development. And that should be a consideration, that the green space, the garden, or whatever else, be very carefully and deeply important to the spiritual purpose of the proper use of the property.
Yeah, thank you. So the comment is about focusing on green space and intentionality about green space, both in terms of its connection to the purpose of the church. But in the last session, I mentioned that my history. I had the great pleasure to work on the Woodruff Art Center and expansion of the High, and the focal point was a piazza. And I think your point is an important one, especially in historic campuses. You know, it's on academic campuses in cities. You know, the town square or an academic green can provide sort of the timeless center, that you might have a historic building, but it's the connective tissue for what changes over time, and it's also the social center for how people arrive, how people connect, and then go to the various places. Thank you. Yeah, yes, ma'am.
I wasn't going to say anything because I'm fairly new at the church, but I'm wondering about the mission of the church. I know that we're called to serve the poor, but then I'm also hearing concerns about passing the church on to the younger generation. And it's a personal concern of mine. I can't get my own kids to go to church. So I'm wondering if there are young people that have a seat at the table in this conversation, because the world that they grew up in and they're living in is completely different than the world that we grew up in. I mean, we grew up without the internet. They're in a much more diverse and open, connected world, and the way the church looks to them sometimes doesn't fit with the way they see the world and what their needs are. So I was just wondering if young people, I mean, we've contacted the neighbors, we're having all these town meetings, but everybody here, for the most part, is, you know, of a certain generation. So are younger people being brought to the table in this process?
Yeah, well, great. Well, first, thank you for speaking up when maybe you didn't feel comfortable initially. So thank you for that. And what I'll say is that that's the second comment in 15 minutes about making sure that we pay attention to that younger generation. So I guarantee that there are a number of process leaders sitting in the room today. That's going to happen because y'all have spoken up. So thank you for that, and I'm certain that it'll happen now.
Hey, I'm like,
Yeah.
We do have plans to engage the youth. We have plans to engage the children. They just haven't been published yet. But Kathy Roberts is going to do something probably very creative with the children, maybe around the survey. And then, of course, I'll probably end up doing something with the youth on a Sunday night for an SNL. And then we've got the young adults that we intend to paying at some point. But very, very good comments. Thank you.
Okay.
Good morning. Yeah, good morning.
Thank you.
Echo the flexibility, sustainability, all those sorts of things. I mean, if you look at this room and the many functions of this room, is a one good example. So I could certainly see a bigger room or more rooms like this. And then on the outside, certainly you could also see that same space where we could have services outside, do engagement, things like that. So a bigger, greener space that's welcoming and opening. So just echoing a lot of the comments in the room.
Great, thank you. So reinforcing the idea of flexibility into the future, of being able to accommodate things we don't know about today, both internally and for exterior green space. Yeah, thank you. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to speak about parking. Nobody says anything here, but we say it other than here. I mean, around the campus. As we get older, parking close to the church is necessary. I mean, we can't walk 3 and 4 blocks as we get older and older. And I just want that to be a noted. Parking is important, close by, on campus, possibly.
Thank you. And parking is important. It's an important part of any kind of campus planning because it takes up space, and frequently it takes up space that's kind of core space. If it is close to the church, it's taking up space that may have competing interests. So it will be a prioritization. And the first church that I worked on was St. Benedict's Episcopal in Smyrna. And one thing that Bishop Alexander said at that time is he said, if your parking lot is 95% full, 90% full, you're turning away people. At that point, there are people that are arriving and driving home. So making sure that there is reasonable accommodation for folks that need to be close to the church should absolutely be a part of it. And it's an important part of the physical presence and how the campus can respond to provide for access to people. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yes, first of all, thank you very much for doing this and engaging in this process, which I understand is complicated and complex and so on, and kind of exciting at the same time. We all come to church for lots of different reasons, and I think most of it is so that we get our spiritual life fulfilled. And then all of the projects and service things help us fulfill that to a certain extent. So I would hope that the church, and I'm sure it would, but I'm hoping that it would continue to feed the flock, so to speak, and that would continue to be an incredibly important part of this process. So education as far as the young people, education as far as the older folks, the more seasoned folks. So just to maintain focus on feeding all of us so that we continue to support the mission and whatever projects your committee ends up coming up with. So thank you.
Well, thank you, and appreciate you pointing out the complexity. I mean, and in a lot of ways, that is what's really exciting to me. Is the fact that the path forward is not straightforward, right? There's not a clear direction of this is what All Saints should do on the campus. You have a commitment and an intentionality of serving your neighbors in need, but at the same time, you're surrounded by Georgia Tech and Norfolk Southern and giant businesses, and it's it's the complexity and the interestingness of the city is at the heart of who All Saints is. So appreciate the point of the complexity, and also appreciate the good point of recognizing why we are all here. What All Saints exists for is to be the presence of Christ in the city, and that what happens is what happens in that the committee will ultimately project will likely be something that's not necessarily straightforward, but should absolutely have that at the core of what happens. So thank you. Yeah.
Good morning. I just want to build on some of the comments around using the block as a space for connectivity for the community outside of Sundays. And so the example that was shared of a coffee house, some of the things that I've been thinking about, where and how does All Saints open up this space as a opportunity for a third space as we think about between home and work? There are examples as I've thought about churches, different bodies of worship that have been intentional about that engagement. There's Ebenezer's Coffee House of National Community Church in Washington, D.C., that I think is a great model. The other that I was thinking about, Sixth and I is a historic synagogue in D.C., and I moved from Atlanta from that area. They have a speaker series. They made it affordable and accessible for young adults to come and hear from an interesting author, a musician, really kind of bringing folks to campus around shared interest and community. And so as I was thinking about some of the comments about where and how we bring the younger generation as a point, I'm also a young family, and so one of the pieces I wanted to share, so often connectivity or community is around sports. And so I've seen some churches in the area use their gymnasiums as a space to say, can we have a basketball league? Can we have a volleyball league? And they're tapping into local communities, opening up the church as a way. So many families get to know church because of that. I think where and how do we use this space to bring folks in? It's just some of the ideas that I was hoping for us to lean into in this process. So thank you so much.
Yeah, so such a great comment of how will the church be more relevant beyond Sundays and Wednesdays, and the opportunity, especially in this location, to connect with neighbors, with the city, and think of interesting ways to bring folks that aren't necessarily already members onto campus through shared interests. So, such an important point. Yeah, and you know, and you gave a couple good examples, but I think if you look at the medieval cathedrals, the church was the center of daily life. It was the center of commerce. It was the center. It's not unprecedented, and I think especially urban churches have that opportunity to be more of a presence in people's daily lives than just a worship service on Sunday. I shouldn't say just a worship service on Sunday, but beyond the worship service on Sunday. Yeah.
Good morning. I just wanted to put a plug in for our existing buildings, especially our more historic ones, that I just want to make sure they're part of the conversation, because there are spaces that need repair and renovation and obviously ongoing maintenance. There was damage from the building of the Norfolk Southern building that's still being situated, but I just, they're such a treasure and an iconic part of our block. I want to make sure that they're part of this conversation.
Yeah, thank you. And I think at the beginning I said that the church, that no decisions have been made. That's not entirely true. I think when we walked in, we were said that it's a given that the church remains, and so there are a few things that. But that will be a core part of the discernment of how much of the campus is open for change, and I think it needs to be. It'll obviously be intentional, and there different buildings perhaps have different values, both functional, cultural, from a heritage standpoint. So that will be an important part of our discernment, and if you have specific opinions about any of the pieces, we'd love to hear them. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
So just speaking about the historic structures and the heritage, this is a very specific technical question, but is the group looking at getting our church building listed on the National Register of Historic Places, which, as you know, does not mean that you can't make any alterations. I mean, National Register sites can even be demolished, but we don't want that. But it actually gives you legal standing if federal money is going to be used for a massive project such as redevelopment of the MARTA station. Because my understanding is that those MARTA station redevelopments are likely to be supported with federal funds. And if such a project has an impact on a National Register site, then you get a seat at the table and potentially some compensation. And as far as I know, we are not on the National Register, and now may be the time to make that happen to give us some legal rights.
Yeah, so the question, I guess there's maybe two questions there. One is the church considering becoming listed as on the National Register? And the second part of the question is about legal rights around historicity. And maybe I'll, relative to pursuing listing, I don't have involvement. Is there? So it would obviously be a slam dunk. I mean, if the church wanted that, and relative to kind of the legal rights, the connection for, or the definition of what's historic has evolved over time, and each municipality has a different interpretation. A very common interpretation of what's historic is if it's listed on the National Register. The federal government is a little bit different. They do Section 106 assessment, and their determination isn't tied to if it's on the National Register. It's if it would be eligible to be tied. So I think that All Saints would have protected rights relative to any kind of federal dollars that would come in. And you're right. If there is a federal expenditure, then it does kick in the historic review of impact. So thank you. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Oh, I'm sorry. Here we go. Thanks.
So taking us back to a little bit of an earlier comment about bringing people in during the week, I have found myself several times in the past few months looking for opportunities for nonprofits, for space for nonprofits to do meetings, all kinds of activities. And I have found myself in other churches, and I'm always like, oh, I wish it was All Saints. Especially because of MARTA, right? I deal a lot with students around the state of Georgia, and if I could have space right across the street from MARTA, it's just, and these are things that are happening during the course of the week. They're bringing in a different demographic than the one that we're maybe used to. So I think some rentable, revenue-generating meeting space would be great.
So there's an advocacy for exploring partnerships with nonprofits that serve the community. And I'll tell you, the church has already done a lot of that research. In the brochure that the church put out, I think it listed maybe 20 organizations that the church has already talked to, not necessarily for partnership, but in understanding what services are already provided to the neighborhood and how the church can help complement them. So, but I think that is kind of the spirit of, in my mind, the spirit of the sweet spot for an urban church, of providing those things, right? And the connection with MARTA is meaningful. I mean, the proximity to MARTA is really meaningful to folks that don't have another way to get here. But thank you. Yeah.
I just want to say I appreciate the thought and leadership that's gone into this, and I'm sure that you are thinking about this. Cost will dictate it, but can we have short-term goals and long-term goals and attainable goals that some of us will get to see?
Yeah. So the question was, how does big thinking get implemented in some way where things always, every project has cost, and there has to be reality with cost. And what I'll tell you, we're working on a number of projects right now that the church is funding all of the development to an extreme where they've partnered with a developer, and it's still mission driven, but it's not costing the church a penny. So there are different ways to think about funding, and I mentioned St. Benedict's a second ago. That was our first church. That was the first church that I worked on, and it was a new church. It was a church that was being planted, and the rector at the time made an arrangement with a local school. Made an agreement for rent and borrowed money against that rent, and that was the funding for the redevelopment of the campus. So again, it was kind of a really interesting way to have both a school, which brought in new families and a connection to the church, but also a way to fund it. So hopefully they'll be thinking beyond just what will it cost perhaps the folks in this room. And there's certainly opportunity for that kind of thinking. Yep. Yes, ma'am. And then we got.
Hi. My idea is a little bit different, maybe outside the box, but when Simon said, oh, thank you. Hi. When Simon said dream, I added dream big. So my idea is a little bit different, but my idea is to build a theater, an All Saints theater. I think years ago, there was a theater here at the church. The theater we would worship God through music, as we do now, just enhance that, and add music and dance. My idea would be to have a large theater and then have a large ballroom and then 2 smaller ballrooms. We would have a floor above that and start teaching music, all classical musical instruments, because I think some of the younger generation is losing that, and we would like to keep that going, start teaching from young to old, including voice lessons, and then teach another floor would be teaching ballet and jazz. With that, you would have an audience that you could send notes home, inviting the children to Sunday school. Say we're having hot fudge Sunday on Sunday school. They go home, they tell their parents, oh, we're going to have hot fudge Sunday at Sunday school. I want to go, and it's right next door. And so you get the kids coming and then the parents to follow. So we would enhance the membership. With that, we would need a parking lot. So there you have it. We have the parking lot. When we use the theater for others, it would be paid parking, so that would be revenue. On Sunday, we would solve our parking problem. We could reach out to, there's a lot of local people, like big local people. You've got Tyler Perry, very giving person. Reach out to different foundations to help get the program started. You've got the Georgia Film Association. We could do first run movies. They could have their party afterwards in the big ballroom. It would give us an opportunity to give scholarships to the refugees, give them an opportunity to learn different musical instruments, learn voice, take dance lessons. And then just the name. When you say, oh, I'm going to see the Nutcracker at the Cobb Energy Center, okay? Now say, I'm going to see the Nutcracker at All Saints in Midtown Atlanta. There's a big difference. That's my idea. Oh, one more thing. We have to add the lofts on the next floor. Okay, we rent the lofts to instructors that don't live in Atlanta. We rent lofts to anybody that wants to live in Midtown Atlanta. And there's additional revenue. That's my idea.
What an exciting vision.
We've got about 2 minutes.
I guess we're done. We're just going to go draw that and wait. But thank you. There's a lot of thought there, and I think that the idea of having All Saints be the performing arts center for Atlanta is from an education standpoint, from a performing standpoint, is a big thought and really exciting. Yes, sir.
I think one thing that's important that a lot of folks would appreciate is an eye toward sustainability, carbon neutrality, focus on sort of from stormwater management all the way to solar panels, that kind of thing, as we think about the buildings, the space, and how we go about all the that comes with it.
So any development that does happen needs to be done in such a way that aligns with who All Saints is, for being a good neighbor. Yeah. Yes, sir. Hey.
This is a real quick question. Just a question.
Yeah.
These are great ideas. How do you convert, so a year down the road, how do you convert these ideas, whatever we decide, into dollars as far as funding and how much income it generates? Do we have an outside firm do that? How do you do that?
So that needs to be, I think it's appropriate for us to say we don't want to be constrained. We don't want the vision of All Saints to be constrained by dollars today. But there's obviously, there is, that needs to be a part of the conversation of if it's going to be something big and impactful. In order for it to be a successful master plan, it has to be realistic and it has to be achievable. And so that, if there are partnerships or if there are there's fundraising capacity, those will be a part of the conversation. But the goal today is to not constrain it with that, because there are so many different ways to skin the cat. Was there? Yeah, and you've had your hand up. Yes, sir.
Two things that I think roll into this. The first one is, if there's a great expansion of what's going on the campus, somebody has to manage that. And I think there will have to be a conversation about how the vestry, how the rector, who's responsible for what. We may need to bring in a different type of management for certain things, and we don't know how we're going to do that right now. And the second one is that part of the process of any new construction or even the existing construction is how do we fund maintaining it going forward. I've always thought that if you raise money for something, 10% of the money ought to go toward an endowment that helps pay for maintenance. So those need to be behind all of these other thoughts.
Yeah. So a couple important points there is that we need to think beyond just what the initial implementation may be, but both the operational impacts in terms of staffing and future operational dollars, that needs to be considered beyond kind of the initial, if there's a construction project. Yeah. Thank you for that.
So I've been tasked as the time announcer. It's now just a little past 11:05, so I'll let the powers that be decide what to do with that information.
So we're coming back. And again, if there's something that you want to for the committee to hear, please use the QR code. Reach out to any of the church leaders, or come back to the next town hall meeting, or we'll see you at a home event. I think that the church has done an awful lot to make sure that everybody who wants to say something will have an opportunity to do that. So thank you. A great conversation.